Afternoon, everyone. I'm Jake Piscano, and my presentation is on Philippine aquaculture and overview of milkfish and shrimp production in climate types 1 and 3. Before anything else, I would like to have a disclaimer. Mention of product names, brands, or companies or industry players does not mean an endorsement of brands or company industry practices, nor does it equate to a negative view of the same. Products used and practices mentioned are shared by farmers and other actors in the aquaculture value chain. It is up to the reader to determine its relevance or appropriateness to their own geographic locations, operations, and business strategies. What is aquaculture? Aquaculture essentially is the farming of plants and animals in the aquatic environment. Why aquaculture? Well, given that overfishing of our oceans and other natural resources is continuously increasing year over year, humans need an alternate source for seafood to feed the planet's ever-growing population. Now, on overview of product consumption and value of the industry, this data is available with PSA, so we will no longer go into the details. History of aquaculture, the earliest record is in Indonesia, where there was a law which was passed against theft of fish in fish ponds in a legal code dated in 1600. In the Philippines, the earliest record is in Rizal province in 1863 and a record in Iloilo regarding the construction of ponds in Dumangas in 1898. Also, there's a literature on the Tagalogs introducing the standard pond system for bangus in Naikwa and Bulacan in 1922. Tend to go into aquaculture, you need to be familiar with some of the laws regarding aquaculture. These include 8550, Section 45 on the disposition of lands for fishery purposes, Section 46 up to 50. There's also the R8N611, the Food Safety Act, FAO 197-1, the revised rules and regulations governing the lease of public lands for fish ponds, FAO 210 for if you intend to export your produce, FAO 214 of the Code of Practice of Aquaculture, and FAO 233, the Aquatic Wildlife Conservation Rules and Regulations. There is also before Administrative Circular number 251 regarding traceability system for fish and fishery products. Aside from this, there are also LGUs which have their own ordinances regarding aquaculture. Also, government standards. There is the regional shrimp gap or ASEAN shrimp gap, which is the good aquaculture practice for shrimp. There is also the PNS or Philippine National Standard for shrimp and crab. There are also other aquaculture standards. These include the Aquaculture Stewardship Council standard, which is the ASE shrimp standard. There's also the Asian Shrimp Improvement Collaborative Standard or ASIC shrimp standard, and the Best Aquaculture Practice BAP for finfish and crustacean farms. These are third-party certifications. There is also the Aquatic Animal Welfare Indicators, which is a recent development. Now we go to aquaculture production objective. Of course, the objective of aquaculture is to generate income through the production and sale of farmed aquatic plants and animals. Now, before, the standard paradigm was sell to buyers, to people in the value chain, projecting harvest volumes, stocking, feeds use, and other parameters sell at optimum prices, and derive income also from incidental harvest or bycatch. In today's paradigm, buyers have a new requirement. This includes high protein levels for the items that they buy, that it is safe to eat, it has overall health benefits, it is not destructive to the environment, it's not abusive to the people that produce the food, and it gives consideration to the welfare and humane treatment of the organisms we use for food. Now we go to the aquatic environment. Now, water is colorless. Color is a function of phytoplankton dominance, density, and suspended particulate matter. Now, this is a map of the Philippines based on the modified Corona's classification. Now, most of our discussions would be on type 1 and type 3 weather areas. Selecting areas for aqua farms, you need to have to study the history of the area to make sure that it is not prone to flooding. It has areas where you can safely operate, and it is not subject to extreme weather events as much as possible. Selecting ponds, normally these are your criteria. You need to check the pond elevation. It should be as much as possible level, so there will be minimal earthwork involved. It should have minimal mangrove growth, clean water source. Soil should be clay loam, silty loam, or sandy clay type. It has shelter or protection from strong waves and flooding, and a freshwater source as well as close to a common road network. Now, what are the production systems for finfish and aquatic invertebrates and sea plants? Now, these are fish farms, both freshwater and brackish water, which are land-based. This may be land-based or recirculating systems. We also have pens, which are either marine, brackish, or freshwater, and cages, both in lakes, rivers, open marine water, and in brackish water systems. Now, these are cages in one is in Pangasinan, the other is in Quezon. One is an HDPE, the one on the left and the one on the right is a metal cage. This used to cost about 350,000 pesos per unit for the metal cage, and the HDPE cages would cost about 1.5 million. These are smaller cages on the top. This one is a small scale pen in Pagsanghan. This one in the center is a cage in a river in Zambales. And at the last picture is a picture of fish pens in Laguna Lake. These are also pond systems, the traditional pond systems that we know. A pond in Cagayan de Oro, a pond with liner with avian device in Pangasinan, which is the new trend these days. We also have a tilapia farm in Davao and an intensive earth and shrimp farm in Capiz. Now, regarding this is an estimate of the cost that you would incur if you were to develop ponds today. Please bear in mind that most estimates that you get do not normally include the land. So if you start from zero, this is what you will get. And you need to have a degree of economic scale. So if you're going extensive, you need about 15 hectares. Intensive, you need about 10 hectares. And for liner ponds, you need about 5 hectares. This is a comparison of technology levels in shrimp production. We have the traditional, extensive, semi-extensive, intensive, and the super intensive. Now, in the Philippines, most operations are essentially traditional or extensive. However, corporate quantities are more on the intensive and super intensive categories. When going into an area, the first thing that we ask is the typical crop season or crop calendar. So you will more or less have an idea of when to start construction, and once you do start construction and finish construction, when do you stock, when do you harvest, and how many crops can you make. Now, this is an estimated computation of manpower requirements. On the left side is I used to be operating a farm of a similar size, so we had about 91 people, and I was attached to a plant. So the plant had 232 people. They were essentially sorters and a few engineering people. For pan preparation for earthwork pans, this is the system. There's a system for semi-intensive and small-scale extensive. You would normally spend more time for semi-intensive ponds in pond preparation depending on where you are. But in extensive, you can normally shorten your pond preparation days. Start operating, of course, will be paying your people. So these are the observed compensation schemes in aqua farms. Most of them, whether traditional or semi-intensive, pay salaries. They have allowances, which is essentially rice. Housing, of course, is free. Light and power is free. Medical, depending on the needs of the people, normally is partially subsidized. Insurance, yes. And incentives, these are essentially a percentage of net income. And crop profit share, well, it's percentage of net income and depending on the generosity of the owner. In traditional funds, the clubs go to the caretakers. And in some other farms, the club goes to the caretaker. The shrimp is divided by three for the owner, for the caretaker, and for somebody else. After construction and hiring your people, you don't go to operations. You go and source your fry from the hatchery. Now you can go to the hatchery and check the fry, ask for a health certificate, and then you inspect the fry. You ask the hatchery to match your parameters of the pond. These include salinity, essentially, and you have the fry counted and packed for delivery. You replenish oxygen as needed, depending on the duration of travel. And then when you get to the farm, you acclimatize the fry, stock the fry, and place a number of animals in a survival bag or monitoring net, which you will count after so many days to determine how many animals were left, which will form a basis for your estimate of feed. Once you have inspected the fry, you start counting. Normally, up to so many bags, you will take only one bag or one or two bags, depending on the representative count, and count it. This is the monodon fry. This is about 4,000 animals. Once you've done counting, you put them into bags, place oxygen, and do the transport to the farm. These are banami fry being prepared for counting and packaging. These are bangus fry being readied for packing. At the center is a fry counting box. If you're counting the fry, you need to place one bag inside the box and count the fry as you put them outside of the box. Now, this reduces the need for adding water every time you drain the counting basin. After buying the fry, you normally grow them in 1 to 2 months, depending on the size that you want and weather conditions prevailing, to be transferred to cages. Now, you can do the harvest by either seining or by allowing water to come in so that the bangus, the milkfish, will enter a catching pond. Milkfish are eutactic, which means that they go against the current. So this behavior will allow you to harvest fingerlings as well as the seining. To harvested the fingerlings, it's either you put them in plastic bags or PE bags and put them on a boat for transport, or you can put them directly into a boat or what we call a pituya. Now, depending on the distance as well as the depth of the water where you're operating, it's your choice whether you use a pituya or a plastic bag. Although in most cases, personally, I would prefer a pituya. Now, on feeds and feeding, the objective of feeding is to provide fish with nutritional requirements for good health, optimum growth, minimum waste at a reasonable cost for maximum profit. Okay, for feed types, there are formulated feed for shrimp, which is the sinker type, and they must be water stable for 1.5 hours. Feed comes in different sizes, from granules to crumble for fry and juveniles to medium-sized finisher and grower for larger animals, in size coded by individual millers. Shrimp feed should be both attractable and palatable, meaning it has sufficient attraction to draw the shrimp and make the shrimp eat. There are also wet feed or fresh feed, which is given to provide variety and stimulate appetite, like agihis, kuhol, trash fish, bagoong, or poultry byproducts. Unload feeds gently to avoid pellet breakage and fines. Feeds are heat sensitive, so uh, sunlight will cause deterioration of some vitamins in the feed. So feed bags should be filed on pallets away from hot or cold surfaces. And all the feeds can be stored for 2 to 3 months. It is always better to consume feeds 2 months from date of manufacture. Stale or spoiled feeds should not be used whenever possible. Aside from feeds, there are other variables to consider. One is the physicochemical parameters and their impact on the fish. Temperature should be in the range of 28 to 30. Critical temperature is when it comes below to 27 or above 32. Uh, Observation is that there is increased virus activity at lower temperature, feed waste and low DO at higher temperatures. So salinity, well, it should be somewhere between 20 to 30. High salinity slows growth but less disease. pH should be somewhere between 7.8 to 9, 7 to 8, I'm sorry. 9 is critical because ammonia is toxic at pH 9. So measure pH during the early morning and measure it again in the late afternoon. pH in the morning would be lower than pH in the afternoon. Dissolved oxygen, as much as possible, you should be in the range of 45 parts per million. Going below 3 can be critical and will result in slow growth for shrimp. For bangos or milkfish, if you go to 2 ppm, you might encounter a fish kill. Indicators for this, if when you see the signage and other fish go up, it's time for you to check your bangos or probably get some boats to provide aeration for the bangus in the cage. Now for land-based systems, water management in exchange for funds is to provide minimum conditions for growth and good health. It is done normally during high tide periods, new moon, full moon, results in increased appetite and activity of shrimp and fish, reduces debris, brings out nitrogen-laden water. Pond water should be stable in terms of phytoplankton population, salinity, and dissolved oxygen. Care is taken that rainwater and pond water do not mix, with rainwater allowed to flow out by flushboard control. Now, work on the farm. There are work that has to be done by caretakers, and there are work that can be done by contractors. Now, what are these? Now, for cage operations, this is net fabrication, net cleaning, net changing, feed delivery, harvesting, logistics, lab services, and security. For aqua farms, of course, gate construction can be done by contractors. Major earthwork is done by contractors. Pond prep, black soil removal, pond bottom scraping, shell removal, and liming, mechanical plowing, all can be done by contractors. Laboratory analysis, sometimes you need to bring this to outside laboratories for confirmation. Security services is also contracted out. Now, why the sudden interest in oysters? Oysters comparatively require lower investment compared to shrimp and milkfish. They require minimal feeding because they're filter feeders. And technology is currently developing and improving, and they provide a positive contribution to water quality and the environment. And there is an expanding market. And the Philippines actually is a net importer of raw oysters. We import oysters from Japan, from Australia, from France, and a few other countries. Now, on the picture on the left is a hanging method with fixed platform, and on the right is the more modern hanging method using a floating rack. The advantage of the floating rack is you can change your location when conditions are not favorable to your operations. Now these are samples of oyster production systems. The one on the left, these are hatchery produced oysters attached to microculture material. The one at the center is a collection of wild spots from a nearby spot collector, and on the right, these are oysters placed in nylon in plastic cages and being segregated according to size. The people on the left are shucking oysters, harvesting, sorting, and shucking, meaning separating the meat from the shell for the oyster. This is intended for the oyster sauce market, while the guy on the right is separating marketable size oysters for the gourmet market. Hatchery bred single spot oysters, which means that they are on microcultures. So they will grow separately from each other and will be easier to harvest, will be more beautiful if you like, and will be of better size and conformation compared to oysters which stick together. Well, now for the threats and hazards, the main threat actually is climate change because of the sea level rise and warming temperatures, which require you to be observant of the height of your dikes every time, unforeseen market movements and industry upheavals, diseases, pests, predation and competitors, pollution, chemical pesticides and contamination, pilferage, safety and security of farm personnel against peace and order issues, and of course, extreme weather events. The picture shows a net stretched out over the section of dike to prevent escape of fish and shrimp, and the lower center picture shows a breached dike caused by water overflow, and the last picture below is a dike leak caused by burrowing animals. Our harvest and safety protocol is as follows. We always monitor the weather reports. So for signal number one, normally that's already dangerous for small sea crabs. So we evacuate family members, women, children, and try to see if we can still do a harvest. Signal number 2 and 3, it's already risky because your boat might just crash against the cage. So it's not advisable to harvest. And on peace and order issues, always do not engage. It's more prudent to withdraw, evacuate workers, and secure assistance from authorities. Even if some companies provide training, it's still more advisable to not engage. Monitoring of weather reports. We average reports of Pag-asa, NOAA, GMA, and Earth. There's the saying, pag may bagyo, mahal ang yelo, mahal ang bangka, mahal ang truck, mura ang isda. So, you need to do those things before the storm hits. There are other fish farm practices. Aeration to maintain high DO levels, enhance gas exchange, predator control, 45 days into culture shrimp ponds normally are treated with TCID to kill off finfishes if you're not doing polyculture. Eat force molts all crustaceans but do not kill them. So we also have bird scare devices, firecrackers, tin can lines, nylon lines to discourage birds from coming in. Competition control during times of the year when the swahe or pasayan is plentiful, we do partial harvest to remove the pasayan as they compete for feed, space, and oxygen availability. Now, gate filter nets, well, we put filter nets right after the sluice gates, so the probability of extraneous animals coming in is minimized. Now for harvesting, if you're harvesting milkfish in cages, you remove the net weights. Milkfish are seined and loaded onto petuyas filled with ice water. Fish are brought to a sorting area for sorting and sizing. Fish are loaded into 25 kilo tubs with ice in layers, and fish may be transported to either the processing plant or the wholesale market. Now, for shrimps, pond is drained or seined, or before we used electric nets. Shrimp are washed and killed in ice water. Shrimps are sorted, classified. Shrimps are packed in coolers, and the raw material is transported to the processing plant and sometimes to the wet market. Now, for marketing, this is the gauge that we do. We monitor as much as we can monitor the prices prevailing, who's harvesting, how much, so we more or less have an idea of how much we can sell. We normally do an assessment over a number of days so we can gauge the trend of the prices, the volume that's coming in before we can make a decision to harvest. These are the wholesale and retail prices for farm fish. Uh, I haven't updated this lately, so but essentially these are still valid assumptions. Now, aside from the regular buying and trading in Nabotas and Malabon and other consignation areas like Dagupan and Subic, there is also now the trend to do things online. So these are the prices that we have gathered for products if you check online. So online prices normally are higher because there's a delivery charge, and probably they're not as fresh as you would want them, but they're available. We also keep tabs on international prices so we know if our price is very competitive or not, so we can make adjustments, and also we would like to know what's going on outside. Now, aside from simply trading and growing the fish and the shrimp, aquaculture is also reliant on some auxiliary industries. These include net makers, net repairers, boat makers, cage repairers, cage makers, people who provide processing, value adding, harvest crew service, uh, retailers and food vendors, as well as people who provide cold chain services, ice, logistics for both land and water. Regarding our observations and recommendations, aquaculture continues to be a profitable undertaking for farmers despite the challenges. Farming will be viable if the farmer anticipates the vagaries of weather, movements of markets, and optimizes the benefits of the natural environment. Treating aquaculture as an ethical business reflecting the aspects of social protection, resource strength, and also animal welfare will allow it to be more sustainable and provide substantial income that can be developed further as stakeholders gain and develop more skills and sustain their own operations. Number three, integrated farming operations are more profitable and resilient compared to standalone operations. Number four, there continues to be a lack of cold chain facilities and services which has to be addressed. And number five, a review of laws governing aquaculture and resource management must be undertaken to repeal or amend laws to encourage more investment and trade in aquaculture. Industry references. Thank you for listening.